Hi, I'm Cameron, and I don't just read comics, I love them. On today's episode of Cameron Reads Comics, we are going to be going over the Marvel Comics graphic novel, The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl Beats Up the Marvel Universe. This is one of my favorite comics of all time. It has heart, it has personality, and it's just wonderful. This book is a great all ages read that I think introduces the Marvel Universe in a very interesting way. I will be talking with my buddy Jack, who hosts one of my favorite podcasts, The Rec Center, so you're going to want to go check them out after this. As always, there are plenty of spoilers ahead for The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl. Also, unfortunately, I didn't set up the microphones correctly, so this is all recorded on my laptop's audio. So, this definitely isn't the best sound quality we've ever had, and we've tried to salvage it as best as we can. But remember, I am still in a learning curve, so have some patience with me. I think the interview and actually this episode is really great, so stick around and hear what we have to say about this awesome story. So here we're going to hop into the summary of The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl Beats Up the Marvel Universe. So here is where the spoilers start. Doreen Green is a computer science student, friend to squirrels and humans alike, and superhero. She is also part squirrel and part girl. Doreen is the unbeatable squirrel girl. Her powers include the proportional speed and strength of squirrels and the ability to talk to squirrels. As the unbeatable squirrel girl, Doreen goes to school to study computer science with all of her friends who also become different heroes. Together they are Coy Boy, Chipmunk Hunk, and Tippy Toe, Doreen's pet squirrel. One day at school, Doreen receives a call from Tony Stark, aka Iron Man. Tony called Doreen to ask if she could convince some squirrels to participate in testing for a new piece of tech that he has. Doreen refuses because squirrels are her friends, not test experiments. During the meeting, there's an explosion, and we find out that the High Evolutionary sent his goons to Stark Tower. During the brawl, Squirrel Girl gets knocked into Stark's mysterious machine. It turns on, and the unbeatable Squirrel Girl gets cloned. Stark's tech was a cloning machine. With double the proportionate strength and speed of a squirrel, the High Evolutionary's goons didn't stand a chance against two Squirrel Girls. Now, Doreen and her duplicate are going to fight crime and do schoolwork, and everything will be great until about 3 days later. Duplicate Doreen adopts the name Aileen. Aileen is more aggressive than Doreen. They team up together and create an initiative called the Squirrel Avengers Initiative. Instead of sending humanitarian aid, they will send squirrelitarian aid. The plan includes benefits to public health, environmental protection, waste disposal, and more. On their walk home, all of the friends see a dead squirrel in the street. This is always a hard sight for Doreen. This is the first time that Aileen has actually ever seen one. Aileen loses it. Why do they keep letting this happen? Why do squirrels have shortened lifespans based on the needs of people? Aileen goes off and needs some time by herself. By the time the team becomes reunited with Aileen, she has come up with a new plan, the Squirrel Avengers Initiative Mark II. This time, instead of squirrels trying to help humans, humans should be helping squirrels. All of the crises and dangers that the world has been caused by humans, never even one time by squirrels. Humans are the problem. Aileen sets her plan into motion by stealing Tony's duplicating machine. She is putting squirrels through it in order to create a squirrel army. Doreen, understandably, can't let this happen, but Aileen orders her new squirrel army to attack Doreen. Doreen survives the attack, but she needs some time to recuperate. In order to take down the new global threat that is the unbeatable Squirrel Girl, the Avengers take the case. When they return to Aileen's hideout to take her out, they realize that it's been booby-trapped. Aileen knows that she can't take down all of the Avengers at once, but if she were to take out each Avenger one at a time and level up her abilities in order to take down the others, she can totally defeat them. And that's exactly what she does. By the end of her initial battle, she's able to armor herself with Black Widow's gauntlets, Iron Man's blasters, and Hawkeye's arrows. Using these tools, she's able to take out other characters. Black Widow's gauntlets take out Spider-Man, Captain America's shield takes out Black Cat. Eventually, she's able to take down Magneto by throwing Ben Grimm, the Thing, at him. Eventually, Aileen has taken out all of the Marvel Universe. The only person that stands in her way is Doreen. After an intense battle, Aileen offers Doreen the ultimatum to walk away. If Doreen doesn't, Aileen will send Tippy-Toe to the moon. In order to save her best squirrel friend, Doreen lunges at Aileen and transports herself to the moon. Aileen said it was unintentional. It was supposed to be a bluff. Now, there's no way to save Doreen in time. With only moments to spare, Tippy hops in Iron Man's gauntlet and races towards Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, which Aileen has been unworthy to yield. Tippy manages to use Iron Man's gauntlet to throw it into space next to Doreen's hand. Aileen mourns the accidental loss of her other. Aileen promises to live up to Doreen's memory by building a squirrel utopia. But then appears Doreen, wielding Mjolnir and decked out in Asgardian garb, declaring nuts to that to Aileen's plan. Behind Doreen is every superhero that Aileen defeated, ready to take up arms all at once. Aileen becomes overwhelmed by the battle, and they eventually win. Doreen realizes that the one being who saved her isn't there. Where's Tippy? In one of the most heartwarming scenes, Doreen asks for the help of every doctor in the Marvel Universe to help Tippy make a recovery after being hurt in the journey to get Mjolnir to Doreen. She says to Tippy, "You've got the Earth's mightiest doctors on the case." Weeks later, Earth is back to normal. Tony apologizes for his machine's malfunctions by giving everyone on the planet an action figure that provides free Wi-Fi and 20 terabytes of memory. Aileen, who is in prison, offers one last option for what to do with her. She asks Doreen to send her and all of her squirrel friends to the negative zone. There, she could build the squirrel utopia that she's always wanted to. Tony and the powers that be decide that this solution could be the most beneficial. In her last words to Aileen as they send her off, Doreen says, "You be unbeatable." Jach, welcome to the Camera Reads Comics podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Jach was always going to be one of the first people that we had on the podcast. I knew because I have very few friends that are like into geek.
You have very few friends?
I'm like,
dude,
I'm immensely unpopular.
Don't talk about that on your podcast. You're supposed to be the captain of this shit. Make yourself sound way cooler than you actually are.
I don't have a lot of friends that are into geek culture, but so. When I meet someone who is into it, I'm like, all right, let's freaking go. And so literally, I don't know if you remember when we met, but when I realized you and I would be friends is when you were talking about the Arrow Season 3 mid-season finale. And so I was like, oh man, this guy's sick, and he thinks Oliver Queen is dead right now because him and Ra's al Ghul just had a freaking fight to the death.
Yep. In hindsight, not a great season of the show, but
not after season 2, especially.
Seriously, the best season of the show. It never really recovered after that.
I'm a season 5 fan, but that's
I
just me.
I like season 5 actually.
I'm like, Prometheus, come on.
Oof.
I'm like, Adrian Chase, nice work.
Yeah.
Okay, well, going forward, will you just tell us about your relationship with, I don't know, like geek culture, pop culture? Like, obviously, you are so enthusiastic about it. You even have your own platform where you talk about it. So
yeah. I feel like I kind of got into comic books and like superhero stuff around the time Avengers came out. That's when I like really got into it.
Yeah.
Like I was a fan of like superhero stuff before I watched like the Batman movies, and I watched like all the Marvel movies like as they came out, like Iron Man 1, Iron Man 2, Captain America, blah blah blah. But I think when the Avengers came out and I saw it in theaters, and like how revolutionary that was for the time, as like the first big like success story of that kind of movie, I knew like at that moment I was like, okay, I want to be. This is like everything to me. Like this is insane, and I want to. It gave me such like a fervor and such like an eagerness to get more into that stuff. To where after that I started, I wanted to know. I wanted to know the long history behind why these characters came together, and especially seeing where they were going, like things like teasing like the Winter Soldier and like the next Captain America movie. I was like, wow, I want to know that story. I want to know all that stuff, like before I see it on the big screen, so I can know that history behind it. It can be even more satisfying. So I think that was like the linchpin moment for me of when I really started getting into that stuff as like a huge part of my life.
Yeah, no, and I think that movie, and I guess really with the dawn of Avengers, the first one, the Avengers 1, if you will, that was kind of a time where it also signaled to everyone else that this is cool.
Yeah.
You are allowed to be a vocal fan about this, and it is now a phenomenon globally, and that wasn't always the case.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, especially for it to be, like, for them to pull off this, like, this, like, shared universe kind of thing, and for it to be not only, like, successful, but to be really good, something that most every franchise has failed to do since then.
Yeah.
It was, like, I feel like even then, I mean, looking back now, like, the 10 years later or whatever, and seeing what it has become, it was I'm so glad I got on board at that point, and I've gotten to experience, like, the once-in-a-lifetime moment. Like, this is our Star Wars kind of thing. Like,
absolutely.
It's like Star Wars in, like, the 70s and 80s. Like, that linchpin, like, generational moment then, like, we are living now, and we're still living, but, like, I mean, there was kind of, like, some sort of closure with Endgame, but,
yeah, right.
like, it's this once-in-a-lifetime phenomenon, and I'm so glad I got to jump on board when I did.
Yeah, and, like, also within that I'm very much a context-driven person, and so having not only this universe and, this really successful execution of comic book culture in Avengers 1 and now through Endgame, I'm very much context-driven, so in the same way that you're talking about, I was very driven towards, okay, now I gotta pick up way more comics.
Yeah.
Because I love this stuff. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I was never really a reader growing up. Like, I read stuff for school, and that was kind of, I read, like, a book here and there, but that's kind of, like, the extent of it for me. But after watching Avengers, it kind of, like, and after, like, my world exploding into comics after that, like, my love for it, it was next, like, to the animated shows that I had grown up watching, but kind of didn't appreciate at the time, like Justice League or Justice League Unlimited or Batman the Animated Series, like, that stuff, which is, like, it's like this gradual process from, like, the movies that I loved, that, like, awakened things for me, to diving deep into these animated shows, which, like, paid homage and respect to so many different, like, comic book stories and storylines and that. And then from there, getting into the comics, and, like, wow. Like, it's like a level deeper each time. It's like, okay, I start this amazing surface thing, and then I get to the next level, which is, like, these animated shows that, like, have such rich stories in them. And it's like, okay, now I'm going to an even deeper level to where there are, 100 years of comic books, all with, not 100 years, maybe like 70, 80 years.
Well, around 80 years with Batman.
Yeah, so around 70, 80 years. There are so many years of vast stories that all, found their footing in these movies now that I'm seeing, and I get to experience that now in so many different ways with reading comic books. So it was kind of like something that not only was fun for me to dive into, but it kind of like helped me become a reader.
Yeah.
Like later in life.
Yeah, no, and it's so rewarding now to be like. It's mutually rewarding to be a fan of the source material and then see something like Endgame happen, because I'm looking for ways to kind of validate this medium that I'm interested in. Because while it is cool to be a comic book fan, it's also it's difficult to explain to people, or like, I spent all day reading, and they're like, what'd you read? And I'm like, so much Batman. And they're like, oh no, you weren't really reading. And I'm like, excuse me? I'm like, what did you do today? They're like, I was on Tinder. And I'm like, get out of my face.
Get out of here.
I'm like, you didn't even try and read anything.
Exactly.
But
why be on Tinder when you can read about Catwoman?
I'm like, oh my gosh, literally actually just read Catwoman yesterday.
I know, man.
Oh my gosh. Anyways, you and I were talking to you, and with comic book culture being as like intrusive as it is, or just like as popular as it is, how do you feel about like, Jack, you're a sneakerhead, and I am not necessarily a sneakerhead, but I'm like a fan of the culture. You know what I mean? There's probably parts of me that are just wired to be collectability. You know, just that's what my framework is. And, and so we joke and talk about the Air Jordan origin stories, the Jordan 1 origin stories, and how do you think that comic book culture and like pop culture has been influenced by this medium that we love?
Yeah, I think that pop culture now is comic book culture.
Yeah.
Like, especially like with, the biggest movies that come out every single year are comic book movies.
Yeah.
And it's something that is so ingrained in the cultural zeitgeist now, to where, maybe in the 80s or 90s, it was kind of more of a niche thing.
Yeah.
To where, people watched the Batman movie, like the first Michael Keaton movie in 1989, and it's like, but, like, other than that, people didn't think about comic books unless you were a reader, unless you were super into these things. But now it's like, it's bleeding into every aspect of our culture, whether it's, news, like where there's specific news sites and news, machines all surrounding comic book news and comic book movie news and comic book TV news. Like, it's hard to go a day without seeing something in media that has to pertain to comic books and popular culture. Whether it's a casting of a new star, or some sort of story leak, or some sort of, release date thing, or some sort of new storyline kind of thing that's coming out. And naturally it's made its way into fashion, which I think is super interesting. I wouldn't consider myself like I love sneakers and I collect sneakers and I sell them and stuff like that, but I wouldn't consider myself like a expert on fashion or like fashion culture or anything. But it's interesting because it's not like these things are being forced. Like there's been like, collaborations with like different shoes, for different superheroes, stuff like that in the past. Like Vans has done a lot of stuff like that, and they haven't really interested me personally. But I think for Jordan, which I collect Jordans, I love Jordans. Like, I think for something like that with the origin story with Miles Morales and Into the Spider-Verse, like, it was such a natural pairing, and it's something that for that character, like, not only the shoes are cool, like the shoes look cool, but for that character, it totally makes sense as to why those shoes for that character were made at the time they were, and like why that was such an important part of his character, and like what makes the viewer like understand him more. It's like, oh, like we get it helps us understand who Miles is like a little bit more, and seeing what the kind of things he's into and what inspires him, and like like Michael Jordan, like I watched like the Last Dance documentary.
Same.
Great documentary. It's on Netflix now. Like, Michael Jordan was a superhero, like, for the entire world in the 80s and 90s, and into the 2000s as well. It's like he was probably the biggest figure, one of the biggest figures in general in the entire world at that time, and still is today. And it's like, for someone like Miles, like that character, it would make perfect sense that he would be inspired to be a hero by looking at someone like Michael Jordan, and for that to make its way subtly into his fashion, that him wearing Jordans every day is a big part of his character, and even as a hero, him wearing Jordans with a spider suit, like that, I feel like it's a perfect mesh to where it's not like I didn't feel like looking at those shoes like, oh, Jordan Brand's trying to just capitalize on some sort of popular IP. It's like, no, like this is a looking at a larger cultural context to where the heroes that inspire us were inspired by the heroes that we had in real life.
Yeah.
Someone like Michael Jordan, to where it's like, it's such a funny and weird and interesting, like, kind of cycle and circle. And I think it's super cool to see that, that people not only got to see that in a character, but they got to buy that and experience that in real life and, wear a part of that themselves.
Yeah, and it's cool to see characters that, we take in as a comic book culture participate in pop culture because, in some weird way, it validates our interest.
Exactly, yeah.
When our interests validate one another, it's a very special feeling, and I think that's what a lot of people are looking for in their fandom too. And so to see a young African American male participate in sneaker culture, something that has been primarily, I guess, enthusiastically invited into young African male culture like sneakers, it's very special to see. Like, oh wow, we feel seen, we feel heard, and especially too, just in another note, those sneakers being the Air Jordan Chicago, they're the Air Jordan 1s with like a blue sole and a blue tongue. Otherwise, it's the same sneaker, you know. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool because I guess Miles can be our Michael Jordan because they took one of the most popular characters in comic books.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They took Spider-Man. Like, he's top 3, you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's fitting because they literally take the most iconic sneaker of all time.
Yeah.
And they give it its own twist that makes it completely unique to itself, but still kind of pays off that nostalgic feeling we have for that character and what it stands for. And at the same time, Miles Morales is the embodiment of that, to where he is Spider-Man. He is 100% Spider-Man.
Yeah.
In the sense that he is Spider-Man that we know. Like, we know Spider-Man, we know what that character is about, but he's also completely Miles Morales and completely unique to himself, to where it's that callback on something that is classic, and something that is true, and something that is, stood the test of time, and it's probably one of the best things ever, and it is also completely unique to itself, and is amazing in its own way, which I feel like is exactly what Miles Morales is as a character.
Absolutely. Well, awesome. That was a great little tangent. But now, going into the story that we read, and the character that we read, how did you feel about The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl beats up the Marvel Universe?
Okay, so this is the first time I've actually read any Squirrel Girl.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Did you know who this was?
Yes, I did.
Oh, so you heard of the character before?
Yeah. I watched Ultimate Spider-Man. Great show.
Great show.
Everybody watch Ultimate Spider-Man on Disney Plus. Drake Bell's a great Spider-Man. I still stand by that. And they actually do some Ultimate Spider-Man stuff on that, like Miles Morales stuff on that show too, with Donald Glover.
Literally, the inspiration for Miles Morales, it voices him on the show. It's perfect.
Yeah, it's amazing. But that show does some Squirrel Girl stuff on it, and that was my first introduction to the character. But since then, I've known about the character because, like, they talked about doing a TV show over the past few years, or like maybe having her show up in the movies or doing her own movie. It's kind of up in the air about what they're actually planning to do with the character. People say Anna Kendrick was possibly going to play.
She wanted to.
Yeah, which I feel like would be amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I didn't really know a lot about Squirrel Girl in the sense I never read any comics about her, but I did know like the gist of the character, that she's basically like kind of like Spider-Man-ish kind of story, but with squirrels.
You know what's actually really crazy is her creator is Steve Ditko, who did the first 33 issues of Spider-Man. Like Peter Parker, like co-creator with Stan Lee. He's the original Spider-Man artist, and so. But when you look at his repertoire of characters, it's like a lot of noir, The Question, Hawk and Dove, all these characters, and then it's like, oh, boom, Squirrel Girl of all characters. And I'm like, I don't know if this character necessarily works outside of the context that we read in this story.
Yeah, like I didn't know about the Steve Ditko thing, that he, like, created the character.
Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy, yeah.
I'm like, that's a fun fact.
Yeah, and it's like, but I totally see. And it's even fun watching in this comic her interact with Spider-Man and have, like, some, like, run-ins with him, to where it's like, I totally see, like, the homage or the inspiration of, like, she's a Spider-Man-esque kind of character, to where it's like, she's endearing and she's fun, and, like, she is bright, and, like, she's hopeful, but, like, she also, steps up to the plate when she needs to, and, like, can be taken seriously, to where it's like, the stories, like, can be dumb and fun, but they're also, like, trying to, like, say something as well.
Yeah. Well, I think we got on other tangent, but going back to the original question, did you like the story?
I liked it a lot. Yeah, it was. Yeah, sorry, my bad.
No, I interrupted you.
Yeah, it was super fun. It was definitely. I got some flavors of Deadpool, some flavors of Spider-Man, and just like other quirky kind of stuff in the comic. But I think it all completely worked for me, and I really had a good time with it.
Good. Did you have like a favorite moment?
Yeah, so my favorite moment, I actually have it up here looking at it. So my favorite moment of the comic is when I mean there are a lot of good moments.
It's a really great book.
It's a really great book. But one of my favorite aspects of the book was the narrator, like, interjecting to the audience.
At the end of every
and the little footnotes on the bottom. Like, totally breaking the fourth wall kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Like, letting us know the writer is definitely in on it, on this story.
Yeah.
So that's probably one of my favorite aspects of the book, like, her just putting her own commentary and joking about things, like, to us, the reader. But one of my favorite scenes in the book was when they're doing, like, a flat, like, Anel, or Aileen, yeah.
That's what I said.
Aileen, yeah. When Aileen is, like, recounting, like, the story when they're at her warehouse, like, when she's making more squirrels, and she's talking about the Iron Man scene, when the squirrels are inhabiting the Iron Man suit, and he's, like, in a meeting, and he's like, oh, the Avengers need me, and he's, like, smashes out the window, and Pepper's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, he's like, well, bye, and she's like, dang it to him, like, every time you do this. And the author puts a little footnote at the bottom to where she's like, see, this is what you get for cultivating a personality in which you can be replaced by a bunch of squirrels in a robot suit and nobody would ever notice. If you are an unpredictable, egocentric, unreasonably rich reader who has become insulated to all consequences of their actions, take heed. And
I don't remember that.
Yeah, like the most funny and, like, complete takedown of Iron Man as a character. Which my favorite thing about this book is I think it totally gets the characters, like, that it's talking about. Like, even if, like, in small doses, like, if we see a character for, like, a couple panels, like, you see that the author gets the characters that they're dealing with. Like, you know, there may be more to Iron Man than this book leads on, but it definitely is totally fair in its treatment of him as a character, and it just cracks me up. So that's probably my favorite scene of the book. Just that little takedown by the author in the end, where it's like, well, due to Iron Man's behavior in the comics over the years, this is completely reasonable for Pepper to believe this or buy this. Like,
no, and when I was thinking about the story and, like, what or, like, the depiction of the Marvel Universe, you know, I really thought that all of them were actually pretty accurate depictions.
Yeah.
But also made it completely accessible. The story is totally accessible to new readers if they want, you know what I mean? Because this is actually one of the first Marvel books I picked up. You know, I read DC for like 10 years solid, and now, probably within the last 5, I started to get into Marvel.
Yeah.
And so this is one of the first ones I picked up, and I'm like, ooh, I kind of understand the base levels of all these characters based on, you know, what I already know about them. And then what they're showing is, I think, true depictions of it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of my other favorite things about the book is that it kind of, like, touches on every, like, nothing's retconned in this book from the Marvel Universe. Like, everything that's kind of happened in the Marvel Universe has kind of happened in this story, it feels like.
Yeah.
Like, Civil War has happened, you know, Sam Wilson is Captain America, like, all these different things that like, readers of Marvel Comics will know that are, like, major events are just, like, kind of, like, in the universe. Like, nothing's kind of, like, retconned or, like, not happening anymore. So, and especially, like Tony, at times, like, references, like, Civil War and, like, fighting with Captain America, to where, like, Aileen?
You're fine.
Yeah, Aileen, yeah. Aileen, like, throws, like, Captain America's shield at him when she, like, turns on them.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, Cap and I have fought before, like, I'm pretty fine with that, actually.
Yeah.
To where it's, like, it's totally accessible in that sense, to where it's, like, it's banking on these things that are pretty well known about Marvel Comics over the years, to where you don't have to, like, do any specific reading beforehand to really enjoy the story.
Yeah.
Because, one, it kind of explains things for you as it's happening, or why, if something's important, like, the author or the will be like, oh, pay attention to that, like, that's kind of important. Or it'll spell things out for you. And like, the big, like, linchpins of Marvel that most people, or lay readers will know, are kind of in this story in the background.
Yeah, like, it references, you know, the clone, like, one of the most Spider-Man references.
Yeah, Ben Reilly, yeah.
Is exactly like when she gets a clone, one of the first people she sees is Spider-Man, and he's like, oh, you might end up having a clone saga, which is obviously one of the most notorious Spider-Man storylines. It's like, oh, it's rewarding to be a reader that, you know, a new reader that could be, like, kind of silly Spider-Man, but it's also like, if you know, then you know, and you're in on the joke, which is super cool about this story that it balances its accessibility with it's like Easter eggs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I don't really read a lot of Marvel comics. Like I've read some big storylines. Like I've read Civil War. I read some House of M stuff. I read Ultimate Spider-Man and like other things over the years. I read some
the
Civil
essentials.
War. Yeah, I read some Civil War too, but I wasn't really into it. So
yeah, you're not the only one.
yeah. But I read like Infinity Gauntlet and stuff like that. So like I know like the big linchpins of Marvel.
Yeah.
Like I like the Marvel comic universe at least. So there wasn't a time in this book where I didn't feel like I knew what was going on. Except for maybe the Johnny Fishlips.
Of all characters to make an actual appearance in the story, Johnny Fishlips.
Yeah, which is like a joke in the story, and
Yeah.
the author like completely like walks you through that why it's funny. So it's like, yeah, there wasn't a part of this book where that felt inaccessible to me.
Yeah.
And I kind of got to like sit back and just enjoy the story for what it was, because of that. To where Marvel, and then I mean DC does this too. It's where they're constantly retconning things and storylines are over and new storylines are happening. It's really hard to keep up, and it's really hard to know what to read and what not to read, what's canon anymore and what's not canon. To where the author at numerous times in the story is like, oh, this is canon now. I'm making this canon.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really fun.
And that's what I like about this being an all ages accessible book for all the fans. Because I really just want this medium to be accessible to people, because one of the most intimidating things about going into any of these, really DC and Marvel, is the 80 years of continuity that they feel like they have to know with these characters.
Yeah.
And that's what I just love about this story, is that they, don't have to know that.
Yeah.
And so, but also you are rewarded in little ways that if you do.
Totally.
My favorite moment actually was one of the things I like about this book is that it has a lot of heart, and I don't think Doreen as a protagonist is like I don't think she's dumb. I just think she's silly, and I like that. I like that difference. She never made any dumb decisions, because all those were like Aileen, who's like frankly evil twin.
Yeah.
But I liked her, and going back to my favorite moment was when she kind of stopped everything that she was doing after she beat Aileen. She literally has a double-page spread of her trying to save her best friend, Tippy Toe. She gets every Marvel Universe hero, Doctor Strange, everyone. She's trying to help and saving her little squirrel friend. And I'm like, oh, there's so much heart there, there's so much love. And it's like, while the story is silly, it doesn't lose its integrity at all.
Yeah. And it doesn't lose, like, it doesn't make it, like, not impactful in any way, and it doesn't make it seem like there are actual stakes, like, happening. It's like, I think, like, I mean, this is kind of unrelated, but it's how I feel about, like, Superman stuff, to where it's like, Superman is a pretty endearing character, but people are like, oh, like, it's make it dark, he's not relatable, or, like, he's too powerful, so, like, you have to make it really, like, harsh, or, like, dull to make it, or, like harsh or dark to make it seem interesting. It's like, or make it feel like there's actual stakes, or, like, there's a point to it. It's like, this story is completely so silly, and it is so funny at so many different times, but, like, I felt like it was still being told for a reason, and I felt like I still was invested in it in a way. I was like, I genuinely am rooting for her, and I am sympathizing with her, and I want to see her succeed in this story that she's in. And it's like, it kind of pushes back its ideas, like, no, something can be endearing and fun and kind, but still be a really good story and be really interesting and be compelling,
Yeah, and I really think, like, this is probably one of my mainstays in Marvel continuity. Like, I'm really glad this is one of the first books I picked up when I'm trying to understand this universe, because, like, while the stakes are pretty ground level, which, is great for an entry-level reader.
Yeah.
While they're ground level, they're also, like, real, and I felt like everything was, like, palpable, and like, this could really happen. I thought all the justifications were really well done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I understood where every character, like, was coming from who had a stake in this.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, that was... And it goes back to... it's digestible, and she loves her little squirrel friend, and she saved it. And I'm like, wow, she's, part squirrel, part girl, which is the funny part, but it's like, oh, I care about these squirrel friends, which became a motivation for her. It became a motivation for Aileen. That's why Aileen turned, you know?
Yeah.
She saw that squirrels are being mistreated by humanity, and so she's like, when I'm balancing this duality of myself, like, I am part squirrel, and so I'm going to defend these creatures. But why do these creatures need to save humans?
Yeah.
How come humans can't save them? And I'm like, well, obviously, as only being mostly human, like, I don't have to make that choice.
Yeah.
I understood her motivation for it. You know what I mean? I'm like, I would never side with her necessarily, but like, wow, that does make sense for a character who freaking loves squirrels, you know, to the point where she like gives herself or has the abilities of one, you know?
Totally.
So
yeah,
I really was into. I really liked that. My next question is, how did obviously we're two males talking about a female protagonist. How did you feel about Doreen Green, just in general?
Yeah, I really liked her as a character. I think it took me a little bit, since this is my first time reading her, it took me a little while to understand her or warm up to her and kind of like understand how she views the world kind of thing. And but I think like it doesn't take too long in the story to kind of understand those things or kind of have those questions answered, to where it's not lost on her, like the kind of pond that she's playing in, that she's a very little fish in it, and that she is even at times like maybe considered not as important as the other heroes. Like she has this back and forth with Iron Man earlier in the story about like them chatting on Twitter and stuff like that. and it's not, it's clear the relationship there to where, he's Iron Man and he's nice, but he's like kind of sarcastic and like, it's not lost on him that he's an Avenger and that he's like this much higher level, person or character, and like they chat on Twitter, but like that's, they're not on the same level kind of thing.
He feels like he's doing her a favor.
Yeah, like you're like, oh, you can come, I'll let you help me out with this thing as a test subject, but
yeah,
and,
I think that it's good. It's always good to have some arrogance when it comes to Tony Stark.
Oh yeah. He doesn't have to be, the nicest guy in the room. He's Tony Stark. Yeah.
Then how did, or in what ways did she grow on you in the story?
Yeah, I think just seeing her, again, it comes back to the endearing nature of her, to where you genuinely see in the story that, she wants things to be better and she wants to do good, and she's well aware that, her superpowers may not be the most, the sexiest in the room or like the coolest in the room, and she may not have the most clout amongst other heroes, but she still has a lot to offer, and she still has something that's completely unique to herself as a superhero. And I mean, say what you want about Squirrel Girl, she is incredibly unique.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's like compared to any other heroes, like, and it's funny like seeing her versus the Avengers, like, or like Aileen against the Avengers, like how unique Squirrel Girl is in herself, like in her experiences, how she sees the world, even if it's from like the darker clone version of her or the good version of her. I think that it was interesting to see and fun to see, like, her come into her own, like, say, like, no, I'm not like any of the other Avengers. I'm not the same kind of hero as them. I don't really fit in that kind of mold as, like, a classic hero that people usually gravitate towards. But my unique style of fighting crime and helping people and solving problems, whether it's as Doreen as Squirrel Girl or as Doreen as a computer science student, her just kind of, like, hustling and, like, doing her thing and, like, and being equally passionate about, like, the smaller things in life that she's working on, like her project with her friends and, like, doing homework.
Yeah.
And, like, fighting crime. It's like, not every person has to be the one to fight the high evolutionary.
Right.
Like, there's complete value in Squirrel Girl just being Squirrel Girl. And the story shows that, to where Iron Man was about to ruin the world and did kind of ruin the world with stealing his device he didn't understand from the high evolutionary, and a Squirrel Girl does one that, to bring it back to ground level, it's like, no, like, this is how we solve this problem.
Yeah, and I thought the way that they depicted her as a real person is another thing that I just applaud in this story. Is that she's a proud computer science student who is in this comic, speaking on basic trigonometry, she's writing code, she's doing all these things, and eventually those kind of end up being a part of the story. I loved that because I'm just like, number one, you're validating education, which all mediums should be doing. I mean, we don't need to knock people for trying to educate themselves or studying. I'm like, that's very cool. I really like how she wasn't dumb. She was just silly. And I'm totally okay with that because I think this character does have integrity, and the way that she fits in her world works.
Totally.
And for all means of purposes of the story, I think they made it incredibly palpable that she could have beat up the Marvel Universe. Yeah. Maybe not, Alien, the way she plans it out is, man, I'm not going to go in and take all the Avengers at once. I know I'll lose. Yeah. No, but if I am able to fight this person with this thing, and then take out Magneto with the thing from the Fantastic Four, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Actually, I found this all really digestible and reasonable, and I'm like, wow, that actually really would work.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, I love that silly doesn't equal dumb.
Yeah.
It's like whether it's Doreen or Alien, it's like, they are both completely smart and capable in their own way to do exactly what they want to do. To where it's like, either Alien, having this intricate plan to take out the Avengers and the villains, and, using the resources she has available to her, including Deadpool's villain ranking cards, which I love. That was, probably my second favorite part of the story. And, them breaking the fourth wall, pretty dumb of Deadpool to make these cards, huh? Pretty convenient. It's like, yeah, it is pretty convenient. But, which I love. I thought it was hilarious. But, Alien in her plan and her execution, even if it's misguided, in her reasoning, or her motivation to do so, it seems completely competent and capable. And it's not some weird or ex machina story device that makes her able to be the Avengers. Oh yeah, because this thing that the author inserted, that's the only reason she was able to do it. It's no, it's just Alien being Squirrel Girl and being really smart and capable and finding ways to legitimately take out all these superpowered beings in the Marvel Universe. And in the same vein, Doreen on the other side of it, S.H.I.E.L.D. coming to her and saying you're our last hope. If you're the one, if you can't, we are unequipped to understand how her mind works and how to dismantle her in this sense. It's we need you because the way you think and the way you think differently and the way you act as a hero and you are as a hero. We tried the Avengers and it obviously didn't work. It's we need that different perspective and a different way of thinking and seeing things to be able to solve this problem.
Yeah, no, and that's what I loved about it. I thought I love Doreen. I think Alien was actually a great character in this story.
Yeah.
And I thought her arc was very well done. Mm-hmm. And how did you feel about Alien?
Yeah, it's kind of like an Ultron type story, or, anything where there's, a hero tries to do too much to prevent things before they happen, or, or
literally, it was
solve too much crime.
Both stories.
Yeah, exactly. Or a Minority Report situation. It's preventing crime before it happens. It's always going to go wrong. It's so. But seeing the squirrel part of her, and those motivations and those and that kind of thinking take precedence, was interesting. To where it's it was not only a battle between the two of them. Doreen and Alien, but it's kind of a battle between which part of them they're prioritizing more. To where it's Doreen, in the sense, is I'm a squirrel girl, I'm part squirrel, I'm part girl, but there is better value, even if humans get things wrong, in protecting them and helping make the system better. To where Alien is well, I have loyalty to both, and I'm seeing squirrels get trampled upon and disregarded. And it's I think they're being undervalued, and I'm going to fight for that side of things. And I think humans have had their chance, and they botched it. So, I think it was super interesting, because I didn't, even if I thought that Alien was kind of crazy, or being crazy, I understood why she was doing what she was doing, even if I disagree with what she was doing or why she was doing it.
Yeah, and there's a line from the story that I made sure to write down. It's actually one of my favorite lines that I think highlights Ryan North's writing and Aileen's motivation, and it's also just so funny and good. He says, this is Aileen talking to Doreen. Aileen says, "Squirrels don't stockpile nuclear bombs. Squirrels don't engineer diseases." And then Doreen says, "Okay, yes, true. But neither do they paint Sistine Chapels or write Hamlets or compose rappers' delights." And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, it was brilliant. Like, that is just so, I just thought that writing was brilliant, number one, because it's very, I think, the tone of this book, but also just, like, each of their motivations are clear.
Yeah.
And so I loved Aileen's arc, and I think that the way that she was going about what she was doing, the thing that makes the story work is that they spent so much time trying to make it like palatable and feasible that she could do this to the point where we back that 110%. You know,
yeah.
I really like Aileen's arc for that, because you talk about a character with, you know, frankly not. I don't want to say, like, she doesn't have much, like, integrity. It's like, when you think about who can actually be in the Marvel Universe, you're not thinking Squirrel Girl.
Yeah.
But for every reason they gave us in this book to believe that she could take them all down, they made it work. And then I think that kind of comes to the culmination of Doreen being able to pick up Mjolnir.
Yeah.
You know, and this story came out, like, pre-Endgame. So, I'm trying to think, like, from an audience perspective, like, you know, a lot of other people have picked up Mjolnir, Thor's hammer.
Yeah.
And so it's not a question of necessarily if they can, it's whether or not they are worthy to.
Yeah.
And so, illustrating the difference between Doreen and Aileen, the fact that Doreen is worthy because she's pure of heart, able to lift up the hammer, I'm like, I back that, I validate that, 100%. They made it believable to me.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, wow, it was just so well done.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's part of, like, the meta-commentary of this story, to where, like, Squirrel Girl, maybe historically amongst readers, has been a character that people don't take seriously, or people kind of laugh at, to where it's like, you know, them in this story say, like, no, like, this is a real character, and, like, there's value in us writing stories about her and you reading them. So, like, you know, her beating out the Marvel Universe and wielding Mjolnir, and that shouldn't make you upset. That should make you say, like, hey, maybe we should take this character more seriously and see the value in her, the kind of stories that she has to offer. So that's why I really like that moment, especially because, like, she didn't seek it out. Like, you know, and, I mean, you know, the hammer has been known to have a conscience of its own.
Yeah.
Like, you know, throughout time. So it's, like, it's interesting to think about, like, well, you know, maybe the hammer, like, sought her out in that sense as well, to where it's, like, you know, yeah, Tippy, right? The squirrel.
Tippy Toe, yeah.
Yeah. Tippy's the one that sent the hammer that way, but, you know, the hammer is the one that saw the value in Doreen and said, like, no, you are worthy. I'm giving this to you. I'm giving this responsibility to you as well to fix things. Like, to a reader, say, like, no, like, this is us telling you that this character is really important and has a lot to value, and that you should maybe rethink the ways that you've thought about them in the past.
Yeah, and it also kind of gives this story a moral compass, because with, you know, one of the problems with this, Aileen and Doreen making such good reasons on why they're doing what they're doing, feeling what they're doing, Mjolnir being kind of the moral compass and literally who can wield it, gives us the idea, okay, well, we know who is right, who is more correct now, because Aileen doesn't value humanity and she prioritizes squirrels. Doreen accepts both. And so I thought that was, it's a good reason, and also we kind of live, especially in comic book continuity, we live in a time where it is oversaturated who can wield Mjolnir and not. It's like, everyone can freaking do it. And so now we live in a time where, like, okay, actually, I thought this was one of the few times where it actually really worked.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I was like, I want to hype on that. And then, you know, the next panel is my favorite Freedom on the book, where she's like, okay, now that we have everyone together. Okay, what did you think about the art in this book? Because I thought, when you think about artists who can do this, you know, were people's favorites. You think of like Jim Lee, or you think of like Alex Ross, or I don't think any of them could have done this book justice the way that Erica Henderson did. So even with the color palette, I thought like the 2-dimensional colors were really great. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it definitely felt true to the character, to where it's like, even like looking at those first panels, I'm like, this feels like a Squirrel Girl comic book. Even knowing very little about the character, for like what I've seen from her on like TV shows and stuff like that, like the art felt very specific to know like, okay, like we're going to tell the audience what kind of story this is for one, and what kind of character we're following. To the art, it's kind of quirky, it's a little bit fun. Like it gives her like the squirrel teeth, and it kind of like, it's not really like traditional body styles that we see generally in comic books. Like, you know, Squirrel Girl has thighs. Yeah. And it's not, they don't shy away from that. And, like, characters have, you know, like, differing body styles, different body types. And I think it's very positive, because it makes those things kind of a lot more normal, to where it's like, you know, Squirrel Girl's not like a Wonder Woman, you know, or Black Widow style character with, like, you know, the sleek curves and, like, this, like, physique that, like, is desirable, quote unquote. Yeah. But, like, she is a regular person, and she's quirky, and she's unique unto herself. And I feel like the art reflects that. But I think it's also fun to see, like, other Marvel characters, like, in this art style, to where it's like they still seem true to themselves. I feel like I'm thinking specifically like female Thor, like Jane Foster Thor. Like, she looks like the Jane Foster Thor from the Jane Foster Thor run. But she's in this book, and she's, like, kind of meshed with the art style, but it's still, they didn't change her, how she looks from, like, what you've seen her in other things. At least to my knowledge. Yeah, and it's like, and it's same as like for the other Avengers for the most part. And it felt, I thought it was very fun, to where it's like, no, like Squirrel doesn't just look like this in this book. Like, this is Squirrel Girl, like for Marvel, like for the Marvel universe. Yeah. And I felt like that was really cool to see that, to where it's like, oh no, like we're not just drawing Squirrel Girl in this like authentic way this one time, and then she's like traditional, you know, comic book woman in the other books that we see her in. But this is Squirrel Girl as you should see her, kind of thing. Yeah, which I really liked.
Yeah, and I think another costume that really worked, which kind of like, I guess, bridged the gap, is Iron Man. Yeah, I thought his costume totally worked. You know, it was like, oh man, especially because he has the 2-color scheme thing going on, anyways. And it's like, it's taking place in the Marvel universe, but the art really set a tone, and that's I thought, I don't think another artist could have pulled this off.
Yeah, I can't think of anybody.
Yeah, and so I was like, wow, I really do applaud this team, because I think that this is one of the best runs in Marvel history, personally. Like, because Erica Henderson and Ryan North did like upwards of, I want to say, 30 issues of Squirrel Girl together, on top of this. This was just a graphic novel released, you know, released the way we read it. So it wasn't like 6-issue miniseries. Okay. It was just like, they put this out, and I was like, it all works. And so it's one of those few teams where, you know, you just kind of get lightning in a bottle, and they really did make something so unique, and it works, and this character gained a lot of integrity because of that, so I'm a big fan. Yeah. Okay, I guess. Alright, we're on to my last couple things, Jack.
Dude, we're wrapping it up. No big deal.
It went real quick. I'm like, it feels like we just started. How did you, or what would you rate this book out of 10?
Yeah, I think I would give it a solid...
Hey, my mic. I'm so excited to I give it a solid hit the mic. Yeah.
I don't know. I think I would give it probably like a solid 7 or 8 out of 10.
It's great that you're the third person on this podcast to give something a 7. I'm like, oh, you're great.
I don't know if my standards are too high or too low. I really enjoyed it, and I would definitely read it again or recommend it to somebody. I'll give it an 8 out of 10.
I'm not trying to guilt trip you or change you, but I'm just a notoriously like high scorer, and like the way I think of it too is when I'm giving people books to share, I'm just like, I actually really rate this story a 10 out of 10. Wow. I think it's a perfect story. Yeah. In its tone and everything else, and so that's my. And one of the biggest things within this is I want to give someone something to like share. You know, like, and I love this story so much, I find it worthy of sharing, which is what you want. You know? Really, like, I think that's how you really kind of show it. It is a worthy story to be told. And so, yeah, no, absolutely 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I feel like because my fiance Hannah, she does not read comic books.
Yeah.
Like she likes the movies and she's really interested in them, and like we show those together. But like she has no interest in reading comic books except for Watchmen, which she loved Watchmen, by the way. But that's like kind of the exception for everybody. Yeah, like I feel like this book is unashamedly comic booky and like fun and like quirky and goofy, but it's also like it's just a really good story and like really good writing, especially like little devices it uses that make it completely accessible and fun for a non-comic book reader. Like I was reading her panels, like especially about with the author like interjecting at the little footnotes at the bottom, things that were cracking me up. And she's like, "What are you laughing at?" I'm like, "I'm laughing at this book. Like, look at this panel. Like, and look at what she says at the end here. Like, this is hilarious." Like I can't remember the exact panel, but it was something about like her falling asleep by watching movies and stuff like that, as like her best trait or something like that.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
Like his best trait. I can't remember exactly the panel, but it's like just the author interjecting about their own life and like poking fun at themselves and like sharing something that like is completely relatable and universal and fun for a reader to experience. And like I feel like any reader loves a good fourth wall break when it's done well.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that for that like aspect alone, I rank it higher because it's not something that just a comic book reader could appeal to, but somebody who just loves a good story and loves reading something interesting and fun could really enjoy this, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I obviously feel that times 10, and I really do love the story, and I just find the characters, all of them, so enjoyable. Like, you can't try and sell me a friggin' Doreen Green, Unbeatable Squirrel Girl with her friends, freaking Chipmunk Hunk, Coy Boy. You know what I mean? And I'm like, oh, and her Talking Squirrel Tippy Toe. I'm like, this shouldn't work, but they make it work so well.
Yeah.
Which is, like, I think that's why I applaud it so much. So, yeah, that's my last question for you, Jack.
That's your last question for me.
Before we go, actually, I am really bugging Jack and Hannah to try and get her on the podcast.
She's got to come on.
The first comic series, I have something for her that isn't Watchmen, and because I think I really kind of have come to the opinion that if Watchmen is your favorite comic, you haven't read enough comics. So, I think that's the same way I feel with the movie Forrest Gump. I don't want to isolate any viewers. I feel like your favorite movie is Forrest Gump. You
haven't watched enough movies, yeah.
Right. I'm like,
I know it's a bad movie, but yeah, you haven't watched enough, though.
Yeah, exactly. And so, going now into plugs. Jack, you actually have one of my favorite podcasts to listen to, the Rec Center podcast.
That's not a theme song. I was just singing a random song.
Oh my, that's all high, 110%. What will you tell our listeners about it and what it's about and how they find you?
So, my fiance and I, we recently got engaged, so
we are so happy for Jack.
So give us money. But we have a podcast where we recommend movies or books or TV shows or podcasts or albums to each other. It's mostly movies and TV shows, but there's a wild card there. Every once in a while, we recommend something else. But it's things that each of us. Sometimes it's things that we've both seen, and we like kind of just like pitch it to each other as like why the other should watch it. But usually it's something that the other hasn't seen, and we like pick something for them. They're like, "Oh, we want you to watch this." And in recommending things to each other, we recommend things to you, the viewer, the listener, not the viewer. It's not a video; it's just a podcast. So yeah, we have like 4 episodes out right now. We've kind of taken a hiatus because of coronavirus, and we've been maxed out mentally. But we're actually going to start up again really soon with new episodes bi-weekly. So yeah, you can find us at the Rec Center Pod on Instagram and Twitter. And we're on Spotify at the Rec Center Podcast, Apple Podcast, the Rec Center Podcasts. I think that's it.
Yeah. I listen on Spotify. Podcast. It is one of my favorite podcasts, and you actually provide so many great like recommendations, frankly. Like, and I'm one of the people who gets recommended too, you know. So, or it's like also that special thing where your pop culture or your thing is validated by your other content, and so like Jack got me into Fleabag. When quarantine and everything started, that was like one of the first things I watched because of your podcast, and I'm like, oh, if you'd be well rich, I'll try and get the hype, and then now I get the hype. And going back to Great Fourth Wall Breaks, that was something that happened to me, or I received on, oh my gosh, you guys were talking about how good Season 2 was? Season 2 was excellent. So, this episode's sponsored by Fleabag. But, like, I just think you guys do a really great job of just, like, and it could be anything that you recommend to one another. Like, Hannah did one of my favorite things. I'm like, she's like, yeah, episode 1. I recommend washing your face before you go to bed. I'm like, wow, that's like so... I'm like, that's actually really neat.
Sometimes Hannah doesn't watch enough stuff, so she has to recommend random things on the podcast, like getting cheesecake recipes, which is fine.
She did recommend. I'm a huge fan. And so, it's a great podcast, and especially for the kind of audience that I believe will listen to something like this. It's like, if you're into content and if you're into culture, then go check it out, because it's really good. And my goal is to have Hannah on here to give her a comic, a different kind of first comic, and I think she'll really like the one that we choose. So that'll happen hopefully sooner rather than later. But
it's going to be Watchmen again. Doomsday Clock.
Yeah, we're going to do Doomsday Clock, and then before Watchmen.
And it's going to be fun for no one.
Yeah, I haven't even read Doomsday Clock.
What I read, it's really, really bland.
I'm like, Jeff Johns, come on, man. And I literally have a Doomsday Clock issue on my wall right now. It's one of my favorite covers ever. But, yeah, we'll get there one of these days. Well, Jack, is there anywhere else our audience can just find you?
You can find me at Lumberjack on Instagram, LUMBERJACH. I spell my name JACH, by the way, because my parents don't like me and they don't want me to succeed in life.
Jack's out here, like, premiering on multiple podcasts and just running his own. Yeah, he's a fiance, but he's not succeeding.
I'm not succeeding because nobody can find my name on the internet. And at Jach McKeown on Twitter. Maybe you can link it in the description.
Absolutely, yeah.
Much easier to find that. Yeah.
I will. I'll try and link all of your stuff, and then really, for sure, guys, go check out the Rec Center podcast. I am a listener. It's really good stuff, and they have a really fun dynamic. So, actually,
we're just roasting each other the whole time, basically.
Hannah has a great voice for a podcast. I'm like, I don't know her well enough to be like, by the way, Hannah, you have a great freaking podcast voice, but she does. So, yep. I'm a fan. I'm a big fan.
She listens too much NPR, I think.
Oh my gosh, that's not a problem. That's not a bad thing. So, anyways, Jack, thank you so much for being on our podcast. This will definitely not be your last time. So,
I hope not. This is amazing. Thanks for having me.
Great. All right. Well, Jack, thank you. Also, wait, I always forget to tell the viewers. Guys, I have my own Twitter page.
Like, plug yourself. This is your podcast, Cameron.
I always forget. Okay, Cameron Reads Comics on Instagram. I'm sure I'm the only one. Go check that out. I got an eBay store with the same name. I'm selling my own comics. Yeah.
He's writing his own comics and selling them.
I'm not writing my own comics. I'm literally writing other people's comics on this one. No. And during the summaries, I just feel like I'm rewriting someone else's words. But anyways.
That's fine.
So Cameron Reads Comics on oh my gosh. Cameron Reads Comics on what did you say? On Instagram. Then I'm Cameron Miller, I think, on Twitter. I don't even know my Twitter handle. Look out, I think it's Cowabunga Boy right now. So
link it in the description.
Cowabunga Boy, linked in the description. I have a blog, CameronReadsComics.blogspot.com. Yeah, I love comics so much. If you want to see what I'm up to, follow me all those places, and then go or follow Jack before you follow me. And follow me, because that's the order that we recorded this. So, thank you, Jack. We appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
We will see you next time.
Bye.